Now it's recording.
Okay. Hello, my name's Steven. Our slide presentation is How Schools at Work. And it's going to be based on two minds, one being Theodore Sizer and another being Ed Hirsch. So to start off with, we'll start with Theodore Sizer. He was a very successful man growing up, even from a young age. He attended Yale and later became dean of Harvard Graduate School of Education in the 60s, and then later became the headmaster of the Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts. He believed, when it comes to education, he believed in more progressive reforms. Curriculum model revolves around schools teaching a small number of subjects in depth, and the topic discussed should be focused on the students' likes and not dislikes, basically meaning, if math, English, basic curriculum, nothing too abstract, and say I'm doing something about math and I like basketball, I'm gonna do math problems that revolve around basketball because it's gonna interest me more and it's gonna make me more, in tune to want to learn about math. So that's what his main idea comes from. In 1984, he actually tested this out. He did a study in public schools, and it actually came back very positive because in high school it was deemed as a place of friendly, orderly, unconscious, wasteful frivolity. And between the students and teachers, he's seen that the high schools, they weren't very productive. They weren't very, what the situation towards like, you're the teacher, I'm the student. Let's just get through this day. Let's just, you know, do the bare minimum. We're not here to actually, what we're supposed to do, which is me being a teacher, you being a student. We're not here to do that. Let's just, deal with each other and get through the day. And that's what he found out when he did the study in 1984. And if we can take a look at this next slide, we'll go more in depth on Theodore Sizer.
So a little bit more about him. He had the Hope Essential High School in Providence, Rhode Island, and that's pretty much like the main example of his work. And their teachers refrained from lecturing, and students were split into 90-minute blocks. These blocks were math, science, English, and social studies. And he launched the coalition of essential schools. So that is pretty much the same thing as the Hope Essential School. He just wanted more schools like that. And from that, his coalition has grown to 238 schools. Sizer believed that true education means that students have habits of mind, and habits of the mind pretty much means asking questions, using your knowledge in thoughtful ways. And he really disliked the lecture drill test system, and we see a lot of those today. And he also disliked standardized testing. He much would have rather had students present exhibitions. And then next we have Ed Hirsch, E.D. Hirsch.
Hirsch Jr. believed that knowledge was most important. He was an educational traditionalist. He thought old-fashioned strategies, learning, in-charge teachers, and tough stuff were the best suited to knowledge building. He also thought kind of curriculum would help disadvantaged students the most. He was in favor of objective
The internet. Does somebody else want to try recording? Because I think that was on my end. Let me see.
It says it's still recording right now.
It's still recording, okay.
Yeah, it just like stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
technical difficulties.
It's bound to
Alright.
happen.
Okay. We're still on this slide?
Ready for the next one.
Okay.
Okay, so
Is this the same one? Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
okay, so continuing on with Hirsch, like Diana mentioned before, he promoted a culture-rich curriculum, and he quoted, "To grasp the words on a page, we have to know a lot of the information that isn't set down on the page." So although his foundation based on cultural literacy may not seem traditional, Hirsch insisted that it was essential for most efficient learning. So when I read this, I typically didn't see a traditional style of learning involving a lot of culture, just because I feel like that's something that's been brought up recently, but we see through Hirsch that it was. So he thought students use their cultural knowledge as the glue and foundation for other new concepts that they will eventually learn and read about. So during this time period, culture was a rising controversial topic in education. So a lot of people didn't value his opinion on culture because they thought he was trying to support culture, which he was, but his main goal was just to get the best outcome for students. And so by learning culture, that was the best way to do it. So it wasn't necessarily him promoting culture for the cultural aspects, if that makes sense. It was just a strategy to get them to do the best academically. But nonetheless, this did bring much attention to him during the late 1900s, during this time of controversy with culture. So he, although believed in traditional ways, culture was a huge part of his foundation.
Okay, so although they had different views on how they felt that students should be taught, they had a few values that that they did share. Number one, obviously education. They were both really highly educated. Theodore Sizer graduated from Yale and Hirsch graduated from Cornell and Yale. And they both went on to become professors. So they were heavily involved in the education field. And during the 1996 presidential election between Bill Clinton and Bob Dole, they really vocalized their opinions because during the election, both of them were kind of promising, both of them as in Bill Clinton and Bob Dole, were promising new tuition plans or putting more money into the schools or developing new schools to help kids get a better education. But instead, they just felt, Sizer and Hirsch just felt that if you just focus on how you're going to be teaching the children and what exactly they should be taught, that was the main thing to focus on, and that can help, help the children become a little more educated. And I think if we go to the next slide here. So they both demanded heavily intellectual education. That's what they're viewing the most here to see what their approach should be. They both created programs for reform. So one was the Coalition of Essential Schools, as mentioned before, and the Core Knowledge of Foundation. And after reviewing both of them, you kind of feel that they may have been able to accomplish more if they kind of found a common ground on what they thought they should be taught or how they should be taught, instead of kind of looking at their different opinions and their views on it. Here we go to the next one.
So their influence, while both were very outspoken, they didn't have as much influence. They had their own schools. Sizer had the Hope Central High School and other schools like it, and Hirsch had Roland Park Elementary and Middle School in Baltimore. But they talked a lot and didn't actually put anything into place. Hirsch is well known for his ideas of cultural literacy, and it actually gave him the reputation of being kind of elitist. Not because nowadays it's not because people don't agree with the importance of cultural literacy, but simply that no one can really figure out how to put it in place. Because when it comes to cultural literacy, this is the ability to understand and participate in a given culture. And it's hard to kind of decide, well, which culture? What are the important things that everyone needs to know about it? It's very subjective, and you can't just say that one thing is the most important.
They also disagreed on the No Child Left Behind Act. Hirsch called it the only practical way to hold schools accountable for educating all children. Sizer, on the other hand, was an author in Many Children Left Behind, how the No Child Left Behind Act is damaging our children and our schools. This had many authors, Many Children Left Behind had many authors who were criticizing just the way No Child Left Behind Act was put into place and just were completely against it. And then in terms of more recent things, Hirsch in theory supports the Common Core standards, but feels that they fall short in practice, that people were cutting too many corners, as he continues to advocate for an updated policy with carefully planned and knowledge-based elementary school curriculum.
I think that concludes our presentation.